is Not Sam Wrestling.
Introducing your host from New York, here is Sam Roberts.
Welcome to episode 344 of Not Sam Wrestling. I am Sam Roberts, and I am glad that you're here. So much to talk about as we start another week in this grand world of pro wrestling. I guess it's Ultimate Warrior week to an extent. The A&E biography of the Ultimate Warrior, which I was lucky enough to be asked to be a part of, aired last night. I have not gotten to see it yet at the time of this recording, but I'm looking forward to it, and I've heard good things. I know a couple people that got to see it, and they said good things. So I'm hopeful, and then, of course, the Becoming the Warrior, the Dark Side of the Ring documentary is on Thursday, which I'm assuming will focus more on the beginning of the guy's career, you know, and how he goes from being Jim to the Dingo Warrior to the Ultimate Warrior and all that stuff. So I'm looking forward to it. One of the most interesting entities in the world of wrestling for sure, the Ultimate Warrior. So I'm looking forward to seeing both of those productions, specifically the A&E biography of the Ultimate Warrior, because I'm in it. And I mean, I don't know what else you could ask from a documentary other than to try to get a little commentary from Sam Roberts, see what he thinks. So I'm happy to share that with you, and I'm happy to share that with you today. Now today, I want to address a tweet that was sent out by WWE on Fox. Well, first of all, two tweets went out on Sunday. One from WWE on Fox, one from WWE. The one from WWE said, who in the WWE has the best hairstyle? Number one, really odd tweet. Very strange. Number two, I mean, come on. Is that a question anymore? I guess you got to update your photos, but clearly Bald Sam, right? Like, obviously it's Bald Sam. I don't think that there's any question. I saw a couple of those votes come in, but I was weirded out that the question was even asked. I think it's Bald Sam by a mile. Maybe we'll have to wait until the next kickoff show that you see me on before technically Bald Sam is even in contention, since I haven't, I guess, yeah. I was on the Ultimate show, which technically aired after I became Bald Sam, but it was taped when I was still Sam with hair. So that doesn't count. So we'll have to wait. We'll have to wait for the WWE debut of Bald Sam. But the tweet that I was referring to went out from WWE on Fox. They are always good for an engagement tweet, always good for a tweet that will spark up a conversation. And that tweet was, who is the MVP of the Thunderdome era? Now, to me, the only breakdown to have here is a breakdown of the question itself. Because if we're just going to take the question on face value, very literally, the Thunderdome era, to me, the Thunderdome era begins SummerSlam weekend 2020. Last August, I want to say the Thunderdome debuted on SmackDown, but I could be wrong. Whatever it was either the SmackDown before SummerSlam or SummerSlam proper. I want to say it was SmackDown. That, to me, would be the beginning of the Thunderdome era, and the Thunderdome era will officially be over on July 16th. Which we'll talk about momentarily. That's the Thunderdome era. It's not because and it's important, and that's where the analysis comes in. That's where the breakdown comes in. It's the pandemic era. The pandemic era starts. You could technically, and it's really odd, and I don't think we think about it, but the first Performance Center show was actually the Wednesday before the pandemic era, to me, officially began. So to me, the pandemic era begins, again, with SmackDown and the episode that emanated from the Performance Center. Absolutely no audience. Michael Cole was basically the host of the whole thing. Triple H was on commentary, and stuff was being pieced together as people went. It was really figuring out, how do we do this show without an audience? That to me is the beginning of the pandemic era. Technically, the Wednesday before that, NXT did Fan Appreciation Night. Ironically, and that was already booked, I believe. I don't think that had anything to do with the pandemic. But ironically, NXT was not at Full Sail, which they had been previously. They were not at Full Sail that Wednesday. And they were running, they invited fans for the first time into the Performance Center. It was a big deal. And they did NXT from the Performance Center. Nobody realized on that Wednesday, though, that for the foreseeable, all shows would emanate from the Performance Center. And even going into WrestleMania, I mean, when that first SmackDown of the pandemic era started, people still thought that WrestleMania was going to happen in the stadium. At first, people thought that they would just do it in the stadium and that would be the last show before they shut down. Then it was like, I wonder if they'll just do it in an empty stadium so they can still have the stadium. And then speculation went on and on until they finally did announce, like all the other shows we've been doing, it's going to happen here in the Performance Center. But that was also a time when, don't forget, they had no idea how long they would be there for. And it was a regular thing. Like leading up to WrestleMania, they would pretty regularly run taped matches. Like, I think it might have been the first Raw out of the Performance Center. Either the first or the second Raw out of the Performance Center. They ran the entire 2020 Royal Rumble match on Raw. With commercials, it took up like an hour and a half. It took up over half the show. So, which is interesting. The only other time they've done that, I believe, was when it was after the Royal Rumble that Roman Reigns won in Philadelphia. That went south because I guess there was a horrible snowstorm and they actually had to host Raw from Titan Tower. They actually had to host, well, from the WWE television studio. It's right next to Titan Tower and you wouldn't know the difference unless you've been in the buildings, I suppose. But yeah, they actually had to host Raw from WWE HQ and then they threw the matches on tape and then they had a Brock Lesnar, Roman Reigns face-to-face interview. They just got both guys into Stamford, into Connecticut, because they didn't have access to the arena that day. But that's all to say that, to me, that SmackDown where Triple H was on commentary, and it was really fun. That was a really fun show. That was a historic show, as a matter of fact. That's the beginning of the pandemic era. So if you want to say who's the MVP of the pandemic era, that's a bigger question. But the MVP of the Thunderdome era is 100%, no question, I refuse to even listen to a debate, Roman Reigns. It's not even close, as a matter of fact. Roman Reigns is doing the best. Roman Reigns was already the top superstar in WWE. Drew McIntyre started nipping at his heels a little bit after he won the Royal Rumble, but Roman Reigns was the guy. We get to the Thunderdome, and Roman Reigns, in front of no audience, is doing the best work of his career by a mile. Thunderdome era Roman Reigns brought everybody around Roman to another level. It brought somehow, after all these years and all the amazing work he's done, somehow the relationship with Roman Reigns brings yet another side of Paul Heyman out as a performer. Thunderdome era Roman Reigns brings Jey Uso with him to the point where Jey Uso headlined 2 WWE pay-per-views in the main event Universal Championship match, and people were into it. It brought Daniel Bryan back to a main event of WrestleMania. It main evented night 2 of WrestleMania, the spot. I mean, there is no getting around it whatsoever. Roman Reigns is the guy, became the guy. Nobody has performed better. Nobody is a bigger star. Coming out of the pandemic, Roman Reigns is clearly, by a mile, your top guy in the promotion. He showed up at SummerSlam as a surprise, taking out Braun Strowman and Bray Wyatt. And it started a tidal wave that hasn't even hit its peak yet. Believe it or not, this is crazy, but we're headed into June. That's 10 months of this Roman Reigns story. Everybody says that they want long-term storytelling. We're in the middle of a story that's been told over the course of 10 months. Head of the table, Roman Reigns. And we're not only are we not tired of it, there's still so much runway ahead of us with this thing. Jimmy Uso just came back. 10 months. It started at SummerSlam, and you remember they did that weird thing where they had SummerSlam and then 1 week of TV and then Payback like a week later. I think it was Payback. And that was where the TV between SummerSlam and Payback was where you got that iconic shot of Roman Reigns and the camera pans out and there's Paul Heyman sitting next to him. Whoa, goosebumps. Yeah, there's nobody better than Roman Reigns in the Thunderdome era specifically. Now, the name that I saw get mentioned a lot, aside from Roman, obviously, I sent him a tweet with a gif of Roman in it because, I mean, come on. But Bayley's name got mentioned a lot. And Bayley, I'll hear. Bayley might be number 2, even for just the Thunderdome era. If you said the MVP of the pandemic era, the names that I will listen to, I would listen to Drew McIntyre. You know, I think that the first half of the era was stronger for him than the second half. I think there's a period of time when Drew McIntyre was the guy. Drew McIntyre put the whole company on his shoulders. Drew McIntyre was the star in the pandemic era. We tend to forget because we're kind of trying to wash the Performance Center era of the pandemic out of our brains. But Roman Reigns was never a part of the Performance Center era. Never. Roman Reigns said ta-ta, was not there for WrestleMania, and didn't come back until the Thunderdome debuted for SummerSlam. So, entire Performance Center era, Roman Reigns was gone for. And in that Performance Center era, Drew McIntyre stepped up in a big way. I think Randy Orton did some of the best stuff that he's done in a long time. I'd probably put Drew McIntyre ahead of Randy Orton in terms of pandemic MVPs. Ironically, when you talk about pandemic MVPs, MVP is a pandemic MVP. You know, MVP returns at the Royal Rumble in 2020, comes to Raw for a one-off, gets a job as a producer, ends up bringing back the VIP lounge as an interview segment. MVP during the pandemic became a wrestler, a commentator, a manager, a spokesperson, and led somebody to the WWE Championship. Make no mistake about it, Bobby Lashley would not be the WWE Champion today if MVP was not a part of the act. Shelton Benjamin and Cedric Alexander would not have had a run with the Tag Team Championship had it not been for MVP with them. Now, I'm not saying MVP would have been as successful without those athletes around him. That's all well and good. But MVP, I think, if you're going to make a top 3, full pandemic era, I might go so far as to say MVP might be the number 1 guy of the Performance Center era. And then a person that encapsulates both. A person that encapsulates some of the best work of the Performance Center era and some of the best work of the pandemic era. And quite frankly, a person that I think has truly found themselves in the last year and a half is Bayley. Bayley, as far as the pandemic era as a whole, I'd listen to that conversation because you have to sit there and go like, look, you can say Roman Reigns is the number 1 guy of the pandemic era, but he wasn't there for the first, quarter of it. And yeah, that's true. That's true. And the first quarter was the toughest part, I think. The Performance Center stuff was, to me, the toughest part, I would imagine. It's the toughest part to watch. No offense to anybody. So that would draw into contention if you were doing the entire era. But you're not. You said Thunderdome era. Bayley, however, when you look at Bayley, I mean, Bayley might be the most underutilized person in WWE. I think the potential that Bayley has right now what she's capable of right now, what she has discovered in herself as a performer, there's nobody on that level. The range that she has for what she can pull off, I don't think it's being tapped into at all. I think they're barely brushing the surface on what she can do. Every situation that she's been thrown in, she's excelled. When you think about the stuff with Bayley and Sasha together, when you think about the separation and how it was used to put Sasha over, when Ding Dong Hello comes out, everything that Bayley has done has turned to gold. Bayley lost like 11 matches in a row, and it didn't matter because she was so good. So, while Roman is clearly the MVP of the Thunderdome era, if you're going to go full pandemic era, I'm such a fan of what Roman Reigns is doing right now. It's going to be tough for me to not say he's number one. But my top three, it's got to be MVP, Bayley, Roman Reigns. Probably in reverse order. For me, Roman Reigns number one, Bayley number two, MVP number three, I think. And if we want to break down the era further, we always can. And we are going to be looking at this era from a historical perspective. Ever since this thing started, not just in wrestling, but in life as a whole, we've talked about the light at the end of the tunnel. And while we've been searching for it, and while it's felt like there might be glimpses of it here and there, it feels like we have finally gotten there. We can see the light at the end of the tunnel. People are getting vaccinated. Many millions of people are vaccinated from this thing. In New York, where I live, the mask mandate has gone away. I mean, some businesses still want to keep the masks in effect, and that's totally cool by me. But the fact that, like, you can go to a gym now, and I go to a small gym. Obviously, I'm a small guy. And people are working out without masks on. To me, it's a sigh of relief. To me, it's a welcomed sight. On Friday, I could take my kid to t-ball practice, and the kids were running around with no masks for the first time all season. Beautiful sight to see. But to me, what really makes me realize is that life is starting to come back. Is that we're not hinting at experimenting with bringing wrestling shows back. We're not going, here, we got 3 shows going here, or we got a set of TV tapings that we're doing in July there. It's like, no, I don't want to know that you were able to book one building for one night. I don't want to know that you were able to book a handful of buildings over a handful of nights. Tell me it's back. Tell me something good. Tell me that you like it. And it was announced, I believe, on Friday. WWE announces the return of live crowds with a 25-city tour beginning July 16th. Yes, starting July 16th on SmackDown, we're going to Houston's Toyota Center. July 18th, Money in the Bank from the Dickies Arena in Fort Worth, Texas. Then July 19th, Monday Night Raw at the American Airlines Arena. Tickets are going on sale May 26th, which is this week, for all of those shows, and then so on and so forth. They say 25-city tour begins in July. I think what that really means is we're back. We're back on the road. Nobody knows for sure. Those are the only 3 dates they've announced. I hope live events are coming back. I hope the whole thing is coming back. I don't think maybe you need to do quite as many live events as you were doing before, but I would love to see WWE on a regular schedule where somewhere in the world, doesn't even have to be in the country. For now, it'll probably be in the country. It said 25-city tour. The fact that they said city, I'm assuming this is all United States. I think global travel is still a little cumbersome. But somewhere in the United States, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, have live events on Saturdays somewhere. If it's not a pay-per-view, live events on Sundays somewhere. And then Raw on Monday night. I think that it's doable. I think people want to get back to it. You can pick your cities. I know New York will show up for it. I know Philly will show up for it. I don't know what the laws are in Chicago right now, but I know they're bringing Lollapalooza back. So I know that they'll show up for it. And, it's really interesting. I think there are some people that are a little bit like, I don't know. Like I saw Stat Guy Greg on Peter Rosenberg's Cheap Heat podcast said he wanted to keep the Thunderdome like permanently. Like he wanted to be like, yeah, this is all TV is still done from the Thunderdome. And I'm like, are you crazy? Are you nuts? And then every Sunday before we tape, before I tape Not Sam Wrestling, I open up a Zoom room for the Hall of Fame level Not Sam shills at patreon.com/NotSamWrestling. We just kind of, throw topics around and gab. It's like, sitting down, having a beer, talking about wrestling with your buddies for a while, right? And I brought this up. And there is some concern for some of the people there going like, well, fans have ruined matches, fans are assholes, fans are this. And they brought up, how there are some people who find it easier to do television without the fans, that it's easier to produce a TV show without the fans because you can do your stories the way you want to do your stories and timing works better. And my response was, yeah, I'm sure it is easier to produce a show without fans. Unfortunately, the show sucks. Right? It's easier to do it that way. But it's also easier for me to just, if I have an essay to write, to just type, done. Except it's garbage. Yeah, but it was super easy. Okay. I mean, the idea, and look, any WrestleMania you want to bring up, you go, what about WrestleMania 20? When the fans ruined Goldberg versus Brock Lesnar? What about WrestleMania, whatever it was, when the fans ruined Brock Lesnar versus Roman Reigns? You know what WrestleMania was worse than any of those WrestleManias? WrestleMania 36 in the Performance Center. Come on, guys. There is no way that this is anything but literally the best news that we've had in the world of wrestling since last March, I guess it was. I want to say March. In almost a year and a half. It's the best news we could possibly get. There is nothing like seeing wrestling with the audience there. If anything we have learned from the last year and change, it's that talking about how important the audience is in professional wrestling is not just a trope. It's reality. Okay, and all I started doing was thinking about some of the great moments that have been completely, not just amplified, but completely changed history by the fact that fans were in the building. For me, the loudest reaction that I ever heard was when Triple H, I was sitting in the bleachers of Madison Square Garden, and Triple H returns from his quad injury. And all night long, they tease, Triple H is coming back, Triple H is coming back. Remember that YouTube Beautiful Day music video where Triple H is working out his legs? His legs are all better. He's coming back, he's coming back, he's coming back. Triple H showed up, leather jacket, denim vest over it. They even said, they waited the entire show, the last commercial break. When we get back, Triple H will be here. Oh my God. The fans are buzzing in Madison Square Garden throughout the commercial break. And when they come back from commercial and time to play the game comes on, the loudest reaction I've ever heard in person. And Triple H coming to the ring to that amount of sound set up exactly what this meant. The sound of the crowd was the essential soundtrack that you needed to hear so that the world watching on television knows the number one guy is back. The guy that fans have been waiting for. The new dude is back. And Triple H, when he left as a villain. And when he came back, the fan reaction was the notification that we have a new superhero. And he's Triple H. And all he did was come to the ring and announce that he's going to be in the Royal Rumble in a week or 2 weeks or whenever it was. And it was enough. All people wanted to do was see that superstar and hear that he was back. Having fans there for that changed it forever. If you had just had Triple H return to a Thunderdome or to a Performance Center, it would have been like, oh, okay, this character's back. It's really cool. I'm glad he's back. But this made it different.
Thanks for listening. Follow at Notsam on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube.
Rate, review, and subscribe. This has been Notsam Wrestling.